Alright, this is our Scada system for Scada class. We made an entire overview of a brewery and the whole process, monitoring various things throughout the process. Starting with the barley, we measure the high and low of the temperature of the silo itself, which then gets pumped into a steeping tank. In the steeping tank, we monitor the amp draw of the auger, the water flow, and then also the weight of the tank itself to know the proper consistency. From there, it goes into the germination tank where it germinates the barley for so long, turning the starches into sugars. That gets pumped into a kiln. In the kiln, we're measuring the temperature of the kiln itself and also the gas flow to make sure we have the proper amounts. Again, alarms will flash high and low to the operator if in excess. From there, the now called malt gets sent to the mash tank. We also added another malt tank just for extra malt, different flavors for our different brews. In the mash tank, we monitor the water flow intake and also the weight to get the proper consistencies again. We're also measuring the amp draw of the auger. Again, too high or too low would alert the operator via alarms. Once the mash is completed, we pump it again, monitoring the pump amp draw and then also the flow to alert us to any issues that may happen. This gets sent into the wort tank. In the wort tank, it is separating out all the solids and the liquids and maintaining just the sugary liquid. We are monitoring the spents, which is the solids auger draw, and we are also monitoring the amp draw of the auger for the wort tank and the weight of the wort tank. From there, we pump into the boiler, again measuring the amp draw and the flow going into the boiler. In the boiler, this is where you add your hops to your beer. We are measuring the amp draw of the hops auger, the temperature of the boiler to make sure it's not too high or too low, the weight of the boiler to make sure we have the proper consistency for our recipe, and then also the flow of the gas to make sure it's not too high or too low. If the temperature of the boiler goes too high, we'll just set it to 230 degrees. I'll show you what an alarm would look like to the operator. First, the symbol will start to flash, and then over here on the alarm screen, it'll show us that we have an alarm waiting, which is telling us the high temp of the boiler tank. This is where the operator could send a technician to make sure it isn't a sensor issue or anything like that, or if there's an issue with the process. From there, it gets pumped into what's called the whirlpool. Whirlpool separates out all your solids, again just maintaining the liquid. The liquid is then pumped through what is called a cooler. In the cooler, we are monitoring the inlet and the outlet to make sure that the differential is good and not that anything's clogged. We're also measuring the cooling water to make sure that the temps are where we want to maintain them, and also monitoring the temp of our liquid. That goes into our fermentation tanks. We have 3 different ones, again measuring the temps, or measuring the weights of the tanks to know how much we have in there. This is where your yeast is added into the beer process, where it creates the beer that we know. From there, we can select whatever tank we want to be pumped, again measuring the amp draw of the tank, of the motor, and the flow, going through our filter to remove any particles in our beer, and maintaining a differential that we want to maintain. This goes into a tank that will be one of 2 tanks that will be pumped into our bottling line. In our bottling line, we measure the flow, and in our keg line, we measure the flow. That is our Scada system, the brewery.